channels television. Network Africa, the rally point for the emergence of a new Africa.
On Network Africa this week, Nigeria's economy is looking good. The trial of the decade continues. Ebola causes a scare, and victims of a genocide are remembered. Nigeria overtakes South Africa as Africa's largest economy.
Without good data, it's very difficult for policymakers to assess what development challenges need to be tackled. When the data is not adequate, the policymaker is left to operate in the dark or simply to do guesswork. And I think when you see the results, you see we've been doing reasonably good guesswork.
Then the trial of the decade continues and things get very intense in the courtroom.
I can't imagine the pain and the sorrow and the emptiness that I've caused you and your family. I was simply trying to protect Riva. I can promise that when she went to bed that night, she felt loved.
Plus, the Ebola virus finds its way to Guinea, Liberia, and just recently Ghana.
This is one of the most challenging Ebola outbreaks that we have ever faced. And right now we have documented cases both in Guinea and in Liberia.
And thousands of people come together to pay respects to the victims of Rwanda genocide, which ended up to 800,000 people's lives.
As we pay tribute to the victims, both the living and those who have passed, we also salute the unbreakable Rwandan spirit to which we owe the survival and renewal of our country.
Welcome to this week's edition of Network Africa with me, Cynthia Are. As always, we begin right here in Nigeria, but this time it's not bad news like attacks by insurgents or Fulani herdsmen. It's some good news. Nigeria has overtaken South Africa as the continent's largest economy after a rebasing calculation almost doubled its gross domestic product to more than $500 billion US. The Nigeria Bureau of Statistics confirmed that the GDP for 2013 in Africa's top oil producer was over 80 trillion naira, up from 42.3 trillion estimated before the rebasing. The new figure shrank Nigeria's debt to GDP ratio to 11% for 2013 against 19% in 2012. Most governments overhaul GDP calculations every year to reflect changes in output, but Nigeria had not done so since 1990. Hence, sectors such as e-commerce and the prolific Nollywood film industry, which is now worth 1.4% of GDP, had to be factored in to give a better picture.
2010 and now.
Growing attention from foreign investors was forcing Nigeria to more accurately calculate its statistics, including GDP.
Without good data, it's very difficult for policymakers to assess what development challenges need to be tackled. When the data is not adequate, the policymaker is left to operate in the dark or simply to do guesswork. And I think when you see the results, you see we've been doing reasonably good guesswork. But we can do better than that. And we don't want to risk solving the wrong problems because we don't have adequate information or statistics, or solving problems in the wrong way. That's why this rebasing is so important.
Nigeria, which is Africa's most populous country, with 170 million people, has been growing as an investment destination owing to the size of its consumer market and growing capital markets. The jump in the official GDP figure ranks Nigeria as the 26th biggest economy in the world, up from 33rd before the rebasing. Even though the GDP per capita rose $2,688 US last year from an estimated $1,437 US in 2012, poverty and inequality widened.
According to a recent World Bank poverty survey, 60% of Nigeria's 170 million people live under $1 a day. Do these results actually reflect the ordinary Nigerian?
It doesn't affect the common masses on the street. It only affects the top shot, the ministers, the governors, and everything. It doesn't affect us because, for one, we don't have job. Where are the job? Where are the economy growing from? Is it the oil and some other things? In fact, I don't have anything to say for this government.
We are seeing it on paper actually until it's finally translated into a common man like me, you know, until I see people getting employed and food getting cheap and fuel going down and everything that concerns the common man. Just a paper's sake and just promoting country's image out there.
Nigeria's annual GDP growth of 2013 is expected to come in at 7.41% after the rebasing, compared with about 6.5% in 2012. The Chief Executive Officer of the National Bureau of Statistics, Yemi Kale, said there is a need to work hard on infrastructure, governance, corruption, and building a social safety net.
We have a huge gap between what is available, 80 trillion, and I can bet you less than half of that is actually being utilized. Let's utilize it fully. Then when we get to the peak, we now start asking ourselves, what do we need, what is left? And it's based on what is left, that is based on what you feel is left, that will determine what you need, what you need and how you need to grow. So I don't want to discuss whether it's double digits. You can grow at 100%. If the growth is not deployed properly, we'll stay exactly the same way we are as far as social indicators are concerned.
Despite its roaring growth of recent years and now a bigger GDP, Nigeria still trails South Africa in basic infrastructure, power and roads necessary to lift its people out of poverty.
Now, outside of our shores, Oscar Pistorius got a harsh grilling from the prosecution in his murder trial on Wednesday. The state prosecutor, Gerrie Nel, vowed to get to the truth as he questioned Pistorius about the killing of his girlfriend on Valentine's Day just last year. The prosecutor immediately boxed the double amputee athlete into a corner in what could best be described by the defense as an ambush. It was seen as an ambush when Nel kept on asking Pistorius about a video showing him shooting a watermelon at a gun range. Now, just so it's clear, it's not up for debate that Pistorius killed Reeva Steenkamp, but the prosecution is trying to prove beyond reasonable doubt that he did so knowingly and deliberately.
A South African prosecutor accused Oscar Pistorius of blaming other people for his mistakes as he sought to prove the Olympic and Paralympic athlete murdered his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp, last year.
A lot, if we carry on, that you will blame anybody but yourself.
I don't agree, my lady.
Now you blame counsel. Mr. Roo, I know him, will not make those mistakes.
I didn't blame Mr. Roo, my lady.
You did.
I said I'm not sure what questions he's asked. I don't even remember him speaking or many of the questions he put to Mr. Mangena.
With the trial now in its 19th day, prosecutor Gerrie Nel, whose reputation as one of South Africa's toughest attorneys has earned him the nickname the Pitbull, has sought to portray Pistorius as an arrogant hothead who is reckless with firearms. He took the athlete to task over the shooting at a restaurant.
You never gave it to your legal team that my finger wasn't on it.
That's incorrect, my lady.
Now, explain. You see, Mr. Pistorius, you're blaming everybody. You won't take responsibility. That gun cannot fire if you don't pull the trigger. Who pulled that trigger?
Pistorius said the gun was given to him by a friend under the restaurant table and went off by itself. The police chieftain, Christian Mangena, gave evidence earlier in the trial, saying the weapon could only fire if the trigger was pulled. The Paralympic star said he could not explain how the gun went off and questioned his own defense advocate Barry Rook's decision not to cross-examine Magina on his evidence. In a dramatic opening to his cross-examination on Wednesday, Nel shocked the Pretoria courts when he confronted Pistorius with a graphic photograph of the dead Steenkamp showing the side and back of his skull, her hair matted with blood and brains. Pistorius broke down and sobbed as Nel pushed him repeatedly to take responsibility for killing Steenkamp.
I've taken responsibility by me waiting and not wanting to live my life, but waiting for my time on this stand to tell my story for the respect of Riva and for myself. I've taken responsibility, but I will not look at a picture where I'm tormented by what I saw and felt that night. As I picked Riva up, my fingers touched her head. I remember. I don't have to look at a picture. I was there.
It's the same thing as the watermelon. You had it now in practice, mister.
The double amputee sprinter, once revered across the world for his triumph over physical adversity, faces life in prison if convicted in the Pretoria High Court of the murder of Steenkamp, a 29-year-old law graduate and model.